Last year, there was this interview that went viral in my corner of the internet, the energy and climate world.
Over the next decade, 2 decades, it is expected that there will be $150 billion worth of oil and gas extracted off your coast.
It's from an episode of the BBC program Hard Talk. The host, who you just heard, went to Guyana, a small South American country, and had a sit-down interview with its president, Irfan Ali, about his country's new role as an oil producer. Exxon discovered oil off the coast of Guyana 10 years ago. And Guyana's decision to develop the oil with Exxon was criticized by some because it means putting even more carbon into the atmosphere. The presenter has brought this up and the fact that at a recent UN climate meeting, most nations finally agreed to transition away from fossil fuels. At a certain point, President Ali has had enough and hits back, talking about Guyana's enormous forest that acts as a carbon sink for the whole world.
0.5 gigatons of carbon. A forest that we have kept alive. A forest that we have kept alive.
Does that give you the right? Does that give you the right to release all of this carbon?
Does that give you the right to lecture us on climate change? I am going to lecture you on climate change because we have kept this forest alive.
It's rare to see this kind of open conflict in the climate world. Stephen, the host representing the point of view of groups like Greenpeace, no more oil. And someone from the developing world gets to fully respond.
No,
I want to continue. I haven't finished telling you what Greenpeace say.
Yes, but let me tell
Greenpeace say we need to keep the majority of the world's remaining fossil fuels in the ground.
Yeah, Greenpeace can say
You're
that.
Not doing that.
Greenpeace and you can say that. But we need to get resources, and the developing world, we need to get resources to build.
And then he comes to arguably what is the most important question.
Who is going to pay for the drainage and irrigation? Who is going to pay for the development and advancement of our country? Are you going to pay? It's not coming from anywhere. It's not coming from Greenpeace or anyone else.
I found this tension refreshing, like a cold splash of truth. Partly because I find climate debates are often way too polite. This interview is such a clear distillation of the conflict between the urgency of cutting emissions and what oil money can provide. I have to say up front that there is a lot going on in this small country. A border dispute with Venezuela, cuisine that combines Chinese, Indian, and African food, charges of rampant corruption, one of the largest virgin forests in the world. An American cult took up residence there in the 1970s. And it also has one of the longest pontoon bridges in the world. But the discovery of oil brought Guyana onto the international stage. Why shouldn't Guyana get rich off of oil? What happens when it does? Because understanding what oil can offer Guyana and other countries is critically important to creating realistic climate solutions that benefit people as much as the planet. I'm Amy Harder, and you're listening to Shocked. Today, serious money. This is a story about money. There are two numbers I want you to think about. The first number is $1.8 billion. That is how much the World Bank has given Guyana from 1969, the beginning of their relationship, to 2024, the latest available number. And that's adjusted for inflation. Most of that money came to Guyana as loans and had to be paid back. That money has to be applied for, reported on, and used for specific purposes. The World Bank money has paid for important things related to education, healthcare, flood risk management, highways, on and on. Here is the other number, $6.3 billion. That's how much Guyana has earned from allowing Exxon to drill for its oil between 2019 and 2024. That's just 5 years. And that money doesn't have to be paid back. It's cash. Guyana decides what to do with it. It's hard to turn down that kind of money. For a long time, Guyana was one of the poorest countries in the world. The discovery of oil changed that. Though Guyana's not the only oil-producing place that we'll learn about. So, to answer the question, why shouldn't Guyana get rich off of its oil? I first had to get a handle on what Guyana was like before Exxon discovered oil off its coast. President Ali, who you heard in the BBC interview, did not respond to my request for an interview. So I got in touch with another politician, David Paterson.
David Paterson is named. I'm currently a member of parliament.
David is part of the opposition party. But despite that, when I brought up that BBC interview, he appreciated part of President Ali's point of view.
Most people were like, all right, yeah, this European fellow here is talking down to us as though. So you applauded him for that, but his response obviously was, in my opinion, wanting.
President Irfan Ali won re-election in September 2025. David's party won't unseat him soon. I asked David what growing up in Guyana was like pre-oil in the 70s and 80s.
It was, to be honest, really a free-flowing childhood. So we had great adventures. Well, it was like semi-rural in a sense. I mean, there are a lot of trees and surrounded by sugarcane fields. As a kid, we took everything for granted. We just viewed the forests as inhabitable areas, unexplored. At the time, there's not many cars. We had tremendous problems with power outages and waters and those things like that. But all that seemed normal because you knew nothing different.
One of the biggest international investments in Guyana came in 2009. Norway and Guyana entered a partnership. Norway owes its wealth to oil, and it provided $250 million to Guyana to pay for projects that helped avoid deforestation, like the forest that President Ali was talking about.
We actually thought it's a lot of money because obviously we just very accustomed to our forests. I mean, so it did sound like a lot of money to us.
Here were some of Guyana's big industries at that time.
Sugar, rice, gold, and timber, Sugar was on the decline. The only industry bringing us in foreign currency was gold.
So that was Guyana before the oil. The oil was discovered in 2015, right on the eve of a national election, the first time David ran for office.
So the initial announcement when it was made, no one in the country, including us, took it seriously. We thought it was just another electioneering ploy, because 3 days before our national elections.
When David's party won, it was a big deal. It was the first time the government had changed parties in 23 years.
It's only after we got in, and as the new administration, Exxon had to come and officially now inform the new administration. That's when we realized that it was really a find.
It was quite a find. It was the biggest discovery of oil in a very long time. David became the Minister of Public Works. He is a surveyor by profession. He and everyone else in government were excited about the money coming their way.
We did a long-term infrastructure plan, and we said, well, fair enough, we would like to fund everything here out of the money that we earned.
In 2020, David's party lost the election, and he went back to being a regular member of parliament. The infrastructure that his party helped plan for is starting to happen, though. That's the big physical picture of how Guyana is changing. Roads, bridges, construction. But what does the average Guyanese person actually on those roads think? If you could stop them and ask, how has your life changed since Guyana started producing oil? Has it benefited you? What changes have you observed in your neighborhood? Has it made it more challenging? Well, we asked a local reporter, Nazima Rakabir, to do exactly that. First, the positives.
When it comes to infrastructure and even healthcare, because you're seeing a lot of regional hospitals being opening and stuff, this is something bigger than what you think it is because we're seeing those visible changes. I think what I believe the oil and gas brings to our country is the safety culture. And I think with that type of culture, we're going to see people living longer.
A lot of things have happened, mainly infrastructure projects. So a lot of roads, a lot of bridges and the likes. And you see a lot more buildings going up and those kind of things. That's pretty much it. And there are a lot more vehicles on the road, I could say.
Well, I've been seeing a lot of high-rise building going up, mostly concrete, steel, glass, a lot of roadworks, but no parking. So you find that the oil and gas has brought in a certain amount of business.
Other than the scholarship was given out, that's the only significant changes that I've seen so far.
The government of Guyana is spending $59 million to give out 39,000 scholarships for bachelor's and master's degrees online. Now the negatives.
The oil wealth has not impacted me in any way. I wish that they would have invested more in agriculture for both young people and the older folks. I would personally like to be a farmer, but unfortunately the opportunities are not there. So yeah.
I can't say I'm benefiting directly because with the changes, there comes higher prices for a lot of things because even though you might have a little more money here and there, it goes back into grocery shopping.
Every time I go to the supermarket, I see it. If I used to get 40 items for $100, now I'm getting less. And it's simply because the pricing, because persons know that it's an oil-producing country, so people automatically raise the price, whether they're seeing an increase in acquiring those items or not, because they think we have money, the price is going up.
But yet the protection of the citizens, especially pedestrians, are not being taken care of. And that's very bad. Take, for instance, I move around with a bicycle. Of course, there are the big trucks now. That is hazardous, dangerous. So you gotta be extra careful. And especially pedestrian and cyclists. Then if the road is uneven, a lot of potholes or whatever. And this is why I am of the opinion that the politicians need to walk the streets. From the politicians and the judges and lawyers. They need to experience what the ordinary citizen is.
Finally, there's an issue of corruption. This was the case before oil was discovered, too. The nonprofit Transparency International ranks all of the countries in the world on perceptions of corruption. Obviously, it's hard to measure actual corruption. They gave Guyana a score of 39. For context, the United States scores 65. This is from 2024. The highest-ranking country is Denmark, with a score of 90. Guyana isn't the only country to have experienced the sudden arrival of oil. The United States has benefited too. I wanted to hear from people here about how oil money gets to them. That's after the break.
If you're getting a lot out of the important research shared on this show, there's another University of Chicago podcast network show that you should check out. It's called Entitled, and it's about human rights. Co-hosted by lawyers and law school professors Claudia Flores and Tom Ginsberg. Entitled explores the stories around why rights matter and what's the matter with rights.
After I learned about Guyana's relationship to oil, I wanted to learn about another place that embraced its oil wealth and created one of the most powerful nations in world history, Texas. Oil was discovered and pumped out of the Texas ground in the early 1900s. People rushed to get in on the money, buying up land and looking for oil. One of the things that was so attractive about Texas oil was that if you owned the land, you owned the oil underneath it. So profits went to the owners of a patch of land, not the state. Yes, there are taxes and fees, and the state makes plenty of money that way. But every time a company wants to drill for oil somewhere, fittingly for the Lone Star State, the oil company has to pay a lone, singular owner. Compare that to Norway or Guyana, where the nation owns the oil. Exxon, Shell, whoever wants to drill it out of the ground, They pay the government. So we wanted to know how the average Texan experiences the state's oil wealth. So once again, we asked a local reporter, Carlos Morales, to ask some people, how has oil changed your life? He went to Midland, Texas. It is a major oil producer in the state.
It's been characterized as an oasis in the desert, and that kind of sums it up. It looks like a suburban city until you drive out 20, 30 miles, and then you realize that you're in a very different area. I came here in 1981 as an oil company geologist, then transitioned, and I was a school teacher within Midland Independent School District for, 15, 16 years. And, the oil industry is what fuels all of this. If you drive anywhere half an hour out of here, you can see evidence of oil fields in some way or another. It's who we are.
Do you feel that, the oil industry is a boon and benefit to the state?
Well, I think you have to look at things in perspective. Yes, it is a boon to the state. Yes, it is a boon to America. But also, I think you have to balance it at what cost is that? It's a mixed bag.
For those who are local to the area, the change has been even more palpable. They've seen people from out of town move here to profit from the oil business.
With the increase in the industry, it's like it feels very, very dominated by oil here. It's weird. It's almost more unusual to find someone that's from here, and it's like a bunch of people who just moved here for work. And it sometimes it feels weird because it's like you get, in a way, it feels like a lot of people that maybe don't care too much about the town itself. It's more just, they're here to make money and whatever. And that obviously doesn't apply to everyone. If someone says they're from here, I'm more caught off guard.
And some who have directly financially benefited from oil see its benefits and drawbacks in their personal lives.
My name is Pierce Keys, and I'm 23 years old. Yep.
Pierce, are you from Midland? Did you grow up out here?
Yeah, I was born and raised. I was born in 2002. I really haven't moved out. I've stayed here the whole time. And been a part of the growth and just the absolute powerhouse that Midland is.
It turns out Pierce's dad was a landman, which means he worked with the oil and gas companies to broker deals with landowners who had reserves the companies wanted to drill. Pierce was interested, and his dad helped him get into the business.
Around here, it's like Hollywood. It's not what you know, it's who you know. It really is. It's who you know. With his connections, he got me, this oil field job.
I mean, the pool, right, of the oil industry and the potential wealth you can make is massive.
Oh, it's huge. Yeah, I went from working in the food industry to literally doubling what I made in a year. Going from the restaurant business to working in that shop, literally doubling my money to almost, $50K a year. And I was 18. And that's a huge money,
I mean, $50K at 18 is crazy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So if I'm getting that at 18 and then all these other guys are getting a lot more and they're older than me, then I can just imagine what they do with that.
I'm curious, 18, you're making about $50K a year. What was your first major purchase? What was all the kind of wild, extravagant things you were able to buy? Or did you just save it? Or what did you do?
Oh, yeah. As an 18-year-old, I definitely blew it, for sure. I blew it. I bought this huge, speaker for my car that I didn't need, I didn't even know how to hook it up. I had to pay my friend who knew how to hook it up to put it in my car. I should have saved instead of spent.
But the speaker was the big purchase?
Oh, yeah. It was like $800 speaker, man. It was the sweetest thing I'd ever bought in my life.
The Texas economy is diverse, with many industries beyond oil. In July 2025, along with all of the ways that oil is measured and exported, as petroleum, petrochemicals, plain old oil and gas, computers were the second biggest export from Texas. Oil money was the foundation for Texas's economy today. And that's what Guyana's politicians are trying to build. The infrastructure that every developing country needs. hospitals, education, roads, and, frankly, whatever they think is important. Remember what President Ali said in the BBC interview.
Who is going to pay for the development and advancement of our country? Are you going to pay? It's not coming from anywhere. It's not coming from Greenpeace or anyone else.
The thing is, the money is coming from somewhere, the oil industry. The oil money overshadows every other source of income. And people are aware of the contradiction. David Patterson put it well when I asked him about it.
It's like dancing between the raindrops. I am very, very conscious as we are in the moment. I will say that we do need oil money. On the other hand, I must acknowledge the dangers of climate change and those things. Unfortunately, the money from preserving the carbon credits and those things, the carbon credit market is not as mature. So you can go to the carbon credit market and get as much money preserving your forests or selling the credits as you can, even though in theory they're supposed to be. So really and truly, you are in a sort of a bind, even though you prefer to not be in the extractive industry. You have an entire country and a population to look after.
I've been turning over in my head the contradictions between what oil money can provide and how that extraction contributes to climate change. And after hearing from people in Texas and Guyana, I wanted to hear what Michael in Chicago thinks about this. Hey, Michael, how's it going? Good to see you again.
It's going well.
Have you taken a look around in this room at all that we're in? Have you also noticed that there's a $20 bill on the ground?
Well, Amy, listen, I'm an economist, and so I know that can't possibly be a $20 bill. Otherwise, someone would have already picked it up. Dun-dun-dun.
Well,
that's an old joke in economics.
That's actually a joke?
That is actually a joke.
You should definitely stick to your day job. Well, Michael, that is an actual $20 bill. But it's sort of like the saying, a dead clock's still right twice a day. Like, when a $20 bill is dropped, somebody will be the first person to see it, and then we'll pick it up.
In my experience, that's true. And in the context of the episode we just listened to, I think you have it all wrong. It's not $20 bills, it's $100 bills. And I would say the history of humans leaving $100 bills buried just barely beneath the ground, let's call that oil and gas or coal, is almost non-existent.
But to be devil's advocate here, one person calls it a $20 bill. The other person might call it a big pile of pollution that's killing people and flooding and lighting the earth on fire. And if you view it that way, don't you think you should just leave it there?
Well, I think there was a terrific exchange with the president of Guyana. And I guess I have a jumble of thoughts. Let me just start with one. One, humans were not put on this planet to stop climate change, nor were they put on this planet to get the most money possible. They're put on this planet to make their lives as full and as happy as they could.
By scrolling TikTok.
By scrolling, according to 19-year-old Jessica, my beloved daughter, 100%.
And a lot of other people, unfortunately.
Yes, I know.
But back to oil money.
Yes.
So you see money buried beneath the ground, and other people see pollution and other terrible things. So isn't it kind of in the eye of the beholder?
Well, I find the whole thing a little weird that people in other places get to judge Guyana's choices. And in fact, one thing that, and I know we planned this, that I really like about this episode is we very intentionally had the reporting from Guyana and the reporting from Texas to make it clear it's not just the other. It's very easy to judge other people, but I think it's a little bit different when it's Texas or it's in your own country. And there you can see that, no, it's not only great to dig oil out of the ground, or in Guyana's case, out of the ocean. It has some real benefits. It makes you richer, free college tuition scholarships, all that stuff. But it also has some downsides. And you can see these people making these trade-offs.
I think the challenge in this conversation and in the whole entire climate conversation is that the trade-offs are not directly against each other. So oil provides all of these benefits. It provides money to a country. It provides an efficient way to move around.
Jobs.
And the trade-offs are environmental damages, which doesn't inflict harm on those things we just listed, at least not directly. If the trade-off was you both gain a bunch of money, but then in a week later, all that money goes away,
They take it away from you.
it would be a more direct experience for humanity. But instead, we have these immediate benefits from fossil fuels that are legitimate and real. But then the trade-offs happen in a different parallel track and play out much more slowly. And so even calling them trade-offs is almost a misnomer because it's a whole nother word that we haven't even invented yet.
Okay. And so let me add to the complexity of what you just said. It's not just that the impact of climate change will unfold over centuries. So that's a complicated trade-off, money today versus damages over centuries. But if you're Guyana, it's a small country and the impacts of climate change will not be zero, but they'll be pretty small relative to the whole world. And so it's kind of almost rounding error if you're from Guyana. It's both that it over some long period of time and most of the damages, I'm going to make up the number, 99% damages are going to be outside of where you live. So that looks like a slam dunk, I think.
Yeah. And, I watched that interview with the BBC and I completely saw the president's perspective. And respectfully to the journalist, I thought, maybe the journalist was trying to get a rise out of the president, which they did. But I think the
president was happy to have that question asked, though, because it let him launch.
Right. But I think there's, my goal in my career is to try to ask questions that engender a more nuanced conversation. And it would have been interesting to be able to ask him, a more nuanced version of that question, because I think that would have been beneficial to our conversation. But then again, this world doesn't really do a lot of nuance anymore.
It doesn't, but I don't think it's that nuanced from his or Guyana's perspective. Like climate change is a global phenomena. And so for the NGOs or whoever to sit in judgment of Guyana taking the oil out of the ground or Texas taking the oil out of the ground with no system for bringing everyone inside the same tent to share the costs and the benefits, it doesn't add up for me.
What I found really shocking about this episode were just the numbers that I talked about in the beginning part. And I just want to repeat them for the purposes of our conversation. And that $1.8 billion is the amount that the World Bank has given Guyana from 1969. But a lot of that money, most of that money, in fact, are in the form of loans, which of course we all know are supposed to be given back. And then the other number is $6.3 billion, which is how much Guyana has received from ExxonMobil between 2019 and 2024. That's just in 4 or 5 years compared to the other batch of dollars, which aren't really dollars, from 1969. And I just think I don't know if, I certainly didn't know that, Exxon was giving that much money with no strings attached. And I think that's a staggering amount of money. And I think it's, I'm trying not to use too strong of adjectives, but I think Guyana probably thought it was a pretty damn good deal. And you can understand why. But I think people need to understand that these oil companies have extremely deep pockets because their products are embedded into our way of life all over the world.
Yes. And I think in a coming episode, we're going to talk about disinformation and whether or not the fossil fuel companies have played some role in that or the degree to which they played some role in it. But I'll go one step further. Should we really be wagging our finger at Exxon for selling us the product that we're demanding? So I think any effort to confront climate change, it doesn't really go to the root. And I think the root is the demand for these products. I don't know if it's like self-delusion or fooling oneself or hypocrisy, choose your favorite description. But so I just find, I find the pushback on Guyana, the pushback on Exxon a little weird. Like people, it's like going to a protest about climate change, getting in your car and driving home, which I think is a meme that the oil company executives say to each other, but there's some truth to it.
But the other side would say that we have been locked into a system by these companies that doesn't give us many choices, although that's beginning to change, but traditionally and historically have not given us many choices to make other decisions that are better for the environment. And yes, let's just scratch the surface on the misinformation topic because we're going to tackle that more later. But I think that's a key part of this. And
but what do you mean by that? Better choices? Like, do you mean less expensive choices? Or because we could have always gone to solar or wind 50 years ago. Those technologies are old. It's just that they were super expensive and people would have rather spent their money on a nicer house or going out to dinner or sending their kids to school, whatever it is people spend their money on. And so there's no they. There's like a conspiratorial they in the background here that I don't really like. Like it's the
no, I agree.
It's the unit economics of how much the alternatives cost. That's what I would say. Now, did the fossil fuel companies distort those choices some? I think there's some interesting evidence that they did, but that didn't change the unit economics.
You know, one thing that I found interesting in the episode, you know, the people that we talked to in Guyana, they were not benefiting that much from this new oil discovery and the money. What do you make of that?
You know, I was surprised by that. I'm more comfortable with data. And so I would like to see some data on what per capita income is in Guyana. Anecdotally, it looks like it's a completely different world. There's grocery stores that have products that people in Guyana had never been able to purchase before. They're living in larger apartments. The apartments have more amenities. And that none of that is to even touch like basically free education for everyone now. And so if they could go back in time, and this isn't some weird game where you have to go back 50 years in time, they could go back in time 5 years ago. Would they say, Exxon, forget it, we don't want the oil production? That's the way I would judge it. And I'm pretty confident that they would be happy to choose the same path again.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with you, Michael. I think sure. I'm always for questions that can be better as somebody whose job is to ask questions. But even still, it's clear that at least for these people, the oil money and the new oil economy was not having a drastically positive experience. Otherwise, they would have said it. I'm not saying it refutes all the data that you've seen about the per capita money income going up, but I think it should, you know, what's the word? A chink in the armor?
Some pause.
Some pause. I think it should give us all some pause and some humility that people's daily lives and experiences can not match up with the data. And I think we see that here in the United States. For all intents and purposes, our lives are getting better. We're living longer. All those objective metrics have over a long period of time, I'm talking 30, 40, 50 years, are getting better. And yet people are getting less happy. And so I'm just saying, I think it's important to not discount the direct experiences of these people. It's also an interesting one last thing on this that, you know, you have in any given sort of way you try to assess a population. There's polling, there's numbers, financial numbers, and then there's focus groups. And these interviews that we did with our stringers down there were more like a focus group, although not a representative focus group because it was just a man or woman on the street thing. But focus groups have a really powerful role in this debate. And so I just thought it was important and something to keep in mind that even if the big picture is very positive, that it may not be positive for everybody.
Fair enough. And, you know, over time, I've come to accept that there are more than one valid view on the world.
Do you think it's
But I want to come back to the $100 bill on the ground.
Well, it's still only $20.
Well, that's
still sitting
on the floor. But like
after we're done recording, whoever gets to it first wins.
Well, I'm crafty. I'm going to dive on the floor.
I'm gonna trip you.
I learned this from a doctor who describing one time that I felt faint, and he's like, "Well, you know, you can't fall down if you're sitting down." I thought it was one of the most brilliant things I've ever heard.
No, I've passed out sitting down before. So I respectfully disagree with that doctor.
It might be off topic for this podcast. Here's what I would come back to, and it's a way to characterize the world. You got things that people say and things that people do. And I have much more confidence in the things they do are meaningful than the things they say. People say I say all kinds of crazy things. And I don't see anyone in Texas saying, you know what? No more exploration for oil and gas. We're done.
But I'm sure there's somebody who says that. Just because you haven't talked to them doesn't mean they don't exist.
No, but it's there's no voting in that direction. There's no large scale societal push. I don't think Guyana either. And so I take a lot of meaning from that. And it's not to disrespect the views that people expressed when they were interviewed. I'm sure those views are legitimate. But I do think that there's a very sharp divide on things that people say and things that they do. And I put extra weight on the things that they do. Now, if you want to get really wonky, in economics, we call that stated preference, things you say, and revealed preference, the things you do. So you might want to bring that out in cocktail parties. I think we do that all the time. Like you say you want to be good to the environment, Michael, but then you drive all around Manhattan. But actually, a fastball to the face out of nowhere. You'd be surprised how many people who say they care about climate change don't take the subway. When it's an incredibly efficient way to get around. But you're on the revealed preference program then. You're like discounting what they say. I caught you. Yeah. And you're like, well, show me the money. This is an exact. One last thing I wanted to ask you is you wanted to, discount's not the right word, but you didn't want to focus on the corruption in Guyana. Why is that? Because I think that part of the reason the story from Guyana is so interesting is it's not Texas. It's not a world that Americans know very well. And corruption is bad wherever it occurs. But there's an undercurrent, which I'm going to have a hard time articulating very well, but there's an undercurrent on the judgment about Guyana that I feel is a little like first world looking down on third world. And so I feel like that's a little bit bringing that in, and by the way, they're corrupt too. Well, there's corruption in this country. Yeah. Yes. And so I think what is really so important to remember, especially as multilateral institutions are starting to fall apart, is 190 countries or whatever it is. We got 190 countries around the world. They're all kind of on their own. They all have to self-determine. They all have to get elected or at least have the support of the people who live there one way or another. And, they're going to make these judgments and we might not like them for whatever particular reason, but we're not walking a day in their shoes. And so I'm very uncomfortable with the BBC reporter's question. And I was too. Yeah. No, I know you were. And it was very elitist. It was a very elitist, condescending. And then there's no looking back on well, what did Britain really do in its era of growth? And why don't we go talk to some of the countries that got colonized and see how that looked in hindsight? And so I just didn't like any of that. And I think there's an element of that with this global energy challenge that we're all facing, where societies have to find ways to trade off between the need for economic growth and balancing environmental goals. And so anyways, I felt like bringing in the corruption at the end was in its own way, a little bit in the same river as the BBC reporter's question. That was my discomfort with it. Mm-hmm. I appreciate you sharing that. Michael, this has been great. Don't take my money on the ground. It's my money. I was just proving a point. Amy, I'm quick and crafty. I'm going to get it in the end. Well, until next time. All right. Take care. Shocked is part of the University of Chicago podcast network. It was produced by Jesse Baker and Eric Nuzum of Magnificent Noise. Our production staff includes Christine Driscoll, Amy Pedulla, Sophie Bridges, Jamie York, and Samantha Henig. Our sound designer is Kristen Mueller. A big thanks to my co-host, Michael Greenstone, a professor at the University of Chicago and director of the Institute for Climate and Sustainable Growth. He also serves as executive producer of Shocked, along with Sam Ori, the executive director of the Institute for Climate and Sustainable Growth. The Institute combines a 360-degree approach to education with frontier research having an impact in frontline communities globally. The Institute's efforts are driven by the need to balance climate risks with societal growth. To follow or support their work, see our show notes or visit climate.uchicago.edu. For more of my reporting, you can look for me on pretty much any social media. Search Amy Herder, or look for my byline at Axios. This is Shocked. I'm your host, Amy Herder. Thanks for listening.